How do you make a choice of a film? Does it seem like a momentous choice? Do you agonize about it, or is it just something you respond to?
When I decide like what to do, it tends to be pretty easy for me. I just either sort of respond to something or I don't. It's kind of a binary sort of response, and I don't second guess it a lot. You respond to something, touches something about something about it touches me in a way that affects me, and I go, okay, I'm going to do this, and then you just sort of commit to it, follow through, and hope that it works. I don't get into a lot of second guessing how our audience is going to feel, how people going to like it. I think the only way to do anything good is to satisfy yourself and hope that other people. One of the things I responded to was the way in which this movie is very unusual in that there's no clear protagonist. There's no good guy, no bad guy. There is a lot of moral ambiguity, a lot of gray, and that it was unusual in that regard. And also that I had done, I had just done Pearl Harbor, and it was. I was in the middle of doing it, actually, and it was sort of getting to be, hard for me to just, only grunt all week. It was just uninteresting, and as an actor, and this was a character-driven movie that would afford me the opportunity to, it was a challenge. It had a lot of acting challenges, and it afforded me the opportunity to really stretch and try different things and try to reach different depths and levels and stuff, and that was the most exciting, daunting thing about it. It sort of does. There's a part of, again, he's not meant to be two-dimensional. Yes, a lawyer means, here in the United States tends to mean somebody who's sort of, you think of somebody who's slightly hypocritical, who's sort of sleazy, or somebody who's, because the law in a lot of people's minds in this country has come to represent like a slightly oppressive thing, not always equated with the justice, but rather people go by the letter of the law, that you can get around things using lawyers, or that the rich end up being advantaged because of their access to lawyers and the law, whereas, other people who don't have that as much money aren't. And but it's also, hopefully, a complex, multi-layered portrayal of a guy who has a whole set of ideals that he realizes, slowly have been compromised and kind of eaten away at by the compromises he's made in his life. And, it's a kind of a story about your people's morals and scruples and values and how they sacrifice those things, and how institutions like the law, like the workplace, even marriage, can sometimes dehumanize us and reduce us to our most base sort of clawing, I don't know if it was Locke or whoever said that life without civilization would be nasty, brutish, and short. And in this case of this movie, it's that civilization in some ways certainly makes us nasty and brutish with one another, in terms of the way it engenders that kind of, clawing, savage, dog-eat-dog sort of mentality. Sam's character, my character, end up in this cycle of violence and revenge and retribution that's a hard one to break. It was just the kind of thing where I really wanted somebody who was a real heavyweight, actor. There's twofold. One element of it, which was purely selfish, was that I wanted to work with somebody who I'd always looked up to and always wanted to work with, in terms of the macro view of my career. And Sam is one of those guys in a very big way. And also somebody who could, lend weight and integrity and depth to a role just by kind of showing up. Which Sam also can do. And so I was extremely happy, thrilled, flattered, honored, pleased, and fortunate to have Sam join me in this endeavor. Mostly, each scene in this movie presented a kind of, there are some just mechanical challenges, which aren't all that interesting, but just sort of, in the car accident and in, trying to pretend it wasn't quite as cold out as it was. Sam and I had to wear wetsuits a lot of times underneath our clothes just to the sake of keeping warm because it was such a deadly cold winter in New York last year. But, most of the real challenge was in trying to make sure that I brought complete sort of emotional honesty and accessibility and realism to every scene, because this is a movie that without the execution of the performances, a pretty high standard, the movie totally falls apart, because that's all there is to propel it. You don't have a rocket ship that you can sort of fall back on, and audiences paying attention to that. It was all about what he and I were doing, and so there was a lot of pressure in that regard. Well, and also before he made Notting Hill, sometimes we're defined by the thing that most of the people have seen, but in fact, he had been directing theater in London for a long, long time. He was extremely well-regarded, well-respected. In fact, Kate Beckinsale's husband, Michael, had done a play with him and said Roger Michell is the best actor of directors I've ever worked with, and that proved to be, no exaggeration. I mean, he's a fine director, and he'd done, Titanic Down. He'd done Persuasion, which I'd also seen, and so and also done and executed, I thought, Notting Hill quite well. So I was excited to work for him, and I looked forward to it, and he exceeded all of my hopes. I mean, he really values acting, performance, and subtlety and nuance, and it was just a pleasure every day. It is fun, and Sidney Pollack is the sort of the ultimate guy you don't want as your father-in-law. Is a sort of smart, intimidating, kind of powerful guy who could, who just would be sort of scary to work for or to have as your father-in-law, but was such a thrill to work with. And he's so fabulous in the movie. I mean, I just think he's got, when he turns on my character and just sort of rips into me, those are like no acting required days. So you get to sort of sit there, and he'll create the feeling in you. You don't have to worry about doing anything. That trailer is sort of a marketing hook, ultimately, and oftentimes, which I don't have any complaint with, because I prefer that to the trailers that give too much away about the movie, actually. So, and if it gets people to come see it, great. I think the interesting thing about it is that I think it's really an unusual and smart and complex look at human nature and the way that people interact with one another and the way that we live our lives. Hopefully, through watching these characters, you'll be able to, like any movie that you like that makes you think about your own life. And I hope this fits among those. There's no other way to really describe it other than to say it's something that I think will cause people to think and reflect about their own life and their own world.